In the deepest corners of our nightmares, where childhood fears take shape and innocence meets horror, there exists a world so dark and twisted that even the bravest souls tremble at its mention. Imagine a place where children are hunted like prey, where giants feast upon the small and helpless, where reality bends and distorts until you cannot tell what is real and what is terror. This is not just a story about monsters hiding under beds or shadows lurking in closets. This is the tale of the Maw and the Signal Tower, two massive structures that stand as monuments to human corruption, greed, and the loss of everything pure in this world. Within their walls, a tiny girl in a yellow raincoat will face horrors beyond imagination, running through corridors filled with creatures that were once human but have become something far worse. Her name is Six, and though she is small and fragile, she carries within her a hunger that might be more terrifying than anything chasing her. Alongside her journey, we will witness the story of Mono, a boy trapped in a nightmare world controlled by a tower that reaches into the sky like a finger pointing toward damnation. Together, their stories weave a tapestry of survival, betrayal, friendship, and the darkest parts of human nature. What you are about to hear is not just a tale of two children trying to escape. It is a documentary of how innocence dies, how monsters are born, and how sometimes the greatest horrors come not from the creatures we fear, but from within ourselves. Welcome to the complete story of Little Nightmares, where every shadow hides a secret, every corner conceals danger, and every moment could be your last. Long before Six ever woke up in the dark depths of the Maw, and long before Mono found himself wandering the pale city beneath the Signal Tower, there existed a world that had already fallen into darkness. This world was not always filled with monsters and nightmares. Once upon a time, it was a place much like our own, where people lived normal lives, worked regular jobs, and raised their families with hope for tomorrow. But something went terribly wrong. The exact moment when everything changed remains shrouded in mystery, lost to time and the corruption that followed. What we do know is that humanity began to transform, not in body alone, but in soul and spirit. The seeds of greed, gluttony, vanity, and cruelty that exist in all people began to grow like weeds in a garden, choking out everything good until only the darkness remained. The Maw itself is believed to have been a cruise ship once, a massive vessel that sailed the seas carrying wealthy passengers who paid enormous sums of money for luxury and entertainment. These were people who had everything but wanted more, who ate the finest foods but were never satisfied, who looked in mirrors and saw only imperfection. The ship became a floating palace of excess, where the rich indulged every desire without thought or care for those below them. Over time, something changed within the Maw's walls. The guests became twisted by their own appetites, their bodies growing larger and more grotesque as their hunger consumed them. The staff who served them became stretched and deformed, their limbs growing long and their features becoming monstrous as they devoted themselves entirely to serving the endless needs of their masters. The children who were brought aboard, perhaps as servants or entertainment, found themselves trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. The Signal Tower's origins are equally dark but different in nature. This massive structure rose from the earth in a city that had once been vibrant and alive. Television and broadcast signals were the tower's power, its ability to reach into every home and every mind becoming the tool of its corruption. People who watched the broadcasts became entranced, unable to look away, their eyes glued to screens that showed them distorted versions of reality. Slowly, the citizens of the Pale City lost themselves to the tower's influence, becoming hollow shells who wandered the streets like zombies, their humanity drained away by the constant static and interference that poured from the tower day and night. The tower needed someone to maintain it, someone to keep the broadcasts running and the signal strong, and so it created or captured the being known as the Thin Man, a tall figure in a hat and coat who could move through television screens and bend reality itself. The story of Six begins in the worst possible place, deep in the bottom sections of the Maw, in an area so dark and cold that even the rats seem afraid. She wakes up suddenly, gasping for air like someone who has been drowning, her small body curled on the floor of a suitcase that has served as her prison. Six is tiny, no more than 9 or 10 years old if we judge by normal standards, but in this world age means nothing because childhood itself has been stolen. She wears a bright yellow raincoat that stands out like a beacon of light in the oppressive darkness surrounding her, making her both easy to spot and somehow defiant in her refusal to blend into the shadows. The first thing Six feels upon waking is hunger, not just the normal hunger of a child who has missed a meal, but something deeper and more consuming, a gnawing emptiness in her stomach that feels like it might swallow her from the inside out. This hunger will follow her throughout her entire journey, a constant companion that drives her forward and threatens to destroy her at every turn. She has no memory of how she came to be here, no recollection of parents or home or life before the maw. All she knows is that she must escape, that staying in this place means certain death, and that something terrible is hunting children like her in these dark corridors. The depths of the maw are filled with dangers that would make grown adults weep with fear. The first threats Six encounters are the leeches, hideous black creatures that cling to the walls and ceilings, their bodies writhing and pulsing with hunger as they search for warm flesh to latch onto. These parasites are everywhere in the underwater sections of the maw, sliding through the flooded passages and dropping from above without warning. Six must navigate carefully through these areas, timing her movements to avoid the leeches, while also dealing with rising water levels that threaten to drown her. The environment itself seems designed to kill, with narrow passages, crumbling platforms, and machinery that operates without regard for the small bodies that might get caught in its gears. As Six explores the depths, she occasionally finds other children, though they do not help her and she cannot help them. These children are called the runaway kids, and they are all trying to escape the maw just like Six. But this is not a story of cooperation or friendship, at least not in these early stages. Every child is alone, driven by their own desperate need to survive, and trust is a luxury no one can afford. Six watches from hiding spots as some of these children are caught by the monsters that patrol the maw, their screams echoing through the metal corridors before being silenced forever. She learns quickly that hesitation means death, that sympathy is dangerous, and that she must focus only on her own survival if she wants to see another day. As Six moves upward through the maw's lower levels, she enters a new nightmare, a prison area where children are kept in cages like animals awaiting slaughter. This section of the maw is patrolled by one of the most terrifying creatures she will encounter, a being known only as the Janitor. This monster was once human, perhaps one of the ship's maintenance workers, but has been transformed into something horrifying through years of service to the maw and its dark purposes. The Janitor is impossibly tall with arms so long they drag on the ground when he walks, allowing him to reach into places where children try to hide. His skin is pale and wrinkled like old leather, and he wears dirty work clothes that hang loosely on his thin frame. Most disturbing of all, the Janitor is completely blind, his eyes either missing or sewn shut, forcing him to hunt by sound and touch alone. This blindness makes him even more dangerous because Six cannot predict his movements by watching where he looks. Instead, she must move in complete silence, avoiding the creaking floorboards and scattered debris that could give away her position. The Janitor's workplace is a maze of cages and conveyor belts, all designed to process children for some terrible purpose that Six does not yet understand. Empty cages swing from chains attached to the ceiling, while others are stacked against walls, their doors hanging open like hungry mouths. The Janitor patrols these areas constantly, his long arms sweeping through the darkness, feeling for the small warm bodies he knows are hiding somewhere nearby. When he catches a child, and Six witnesses this horror more than once during her passage through his domain, the Janitor wraps his elongated arms around his prey multiple times like a snake coiling around a mouse, then carries the screaming child away to some unseen fate. Six must use every ounce of courage and cunning she possesses to navigate the Janitor's lair. She hides inside cages, beneath tables, and behind barrels, always staying just out of reach of those groping arms. The tension during these sections is almost unbearable because one small mistake means capture and death. Six finds that she can use the environment to her advantage, pushing objects to create noise in one direction while she moves in another, or climbing to high places where the Janitor's arms cannot quite reach. But the monster is persistent and patient, never giving up his search, always knowing that eventually the children must move, and when they do, he will be ready. The hunger strikes Six again during her time in the Janitor's domain, the pain in her stomach becoming so intense that she doubles over, barely able to continue. She finds food scattered in corners, a piece of bread here, a chunk of meat there, and she devours these scraps desperately, barely taking time to breathe between bites. The food helps, but it never fully satisfies the hunger, which seems to grow stronger with each feeding rather than weaker. This hunger is not normal, Six begins to realize, though she does not yet understand what it means or where it comes from. There is something wrong inside her, something dark and powerful that demands to be fed. After a terrifying chase sequence where the janitor finally corners Six and she is forced to fight back, something changes in our small protagonist. Using a heavy door, Six manages to trap the janitor's arms, and in a moment of desperate survival instinct, she does something truly brutal. She cuts off his arms with the door's mechanism, severing those impossibly long limbs that have caught so many children before her. The janitor's screams fill the corridors as he writhes in agony, and Six does not wait to see what happens next. She runs, her yellow raincoat flapping behind her, pushing deeper into the maw's mechanical sections. The industrial areas of the maw are loud and dangerous in completely different ways than the janitor's lair. Here, massive gears turn constantly, crushing anything caught between their teeth. Conveyor belts move boxes and cargo through tight spaces. Furnaces burn with intense heat, their fires fed by coal or perhaps something worse. Six must navigate through this mechanical nightmare, timing her movements to avoid being crushed, burned, or swept away. The machinery seems almost alive, groaning and hissing like a great metal beast, and Six is just a tiny speck of yellow moving through its iron guts. As she progresses, Six begins to understand more about the maw's purpose through environmental clues. She sees cages being transported on conveyor belts, empty now but clearly meant to hold children. She discovers chutes that lead downward toward the lower levels, designed to deliver whatever the upper levels have finished with down to the depths. Everything in the maw is connected, she realizes, every section serving a specific function in a larger, more horrible system. The guests above are eating something, and the entire ship exists to provide them with their terrible feast. Six does not want to think about what that feast might be, but the evidence is everywhere once she knows to look for it. During her journey through the machinery, Six encounters another child briefly, a boy who has also managed to survive this far. For a moment, they look at each other, two small figures in a world of giants and monsters, and there is recognition of shared suffering. But before they can do anything more, circumstances force them apart. Six watches as the other child is crushed by machinery he could not avoid, his small body disappearing beneath the grinding gears. She wants to look away but cannot, and something hardens inside her heart. She cannot afford to care about the other children, cannot allow herself to feel their pain or mourn their deaths. Caring means weakness, and weakness means death. The hunger comes again, stronger this time, and Six nearly collapses from its intensity. She finds a rat, one of the disease-ridden vermin that infest the maw's lower levels, and without hesitation she grabs it with both hands. The rat squeals and tries to bite her, but Six's hunger is stronger than her disgust. She bites into the rat's body, her teeth tearing through fur and flesh, the warm blood filling her mouth. It is disgusting and revolting, and she hates every second of it. But the hunger demands to be fed, and she has no choice. When she finishes, she wipes her mouth with the back of her hand and continues forward, trying not to think about what she has just done. Six emerges from the industrial sections into an area that should be comforting compared to what she has endured, but somehow is even more disturbing. She has reached the maw's kitchen, a massive food preparation area where the twin chefs work day and night to create the feasts that feed the guests above. These two creatures are among the most grotesque beings on the maw, bloated and pale, wearing stained white chef uniforms and tall chef hats that barely contain their bulging heads. The twin chefs are identical in appearance, so similar that they might actually be two halves of the same being somehow split apart. They work in perfect synchronization, one preparing ingredients while the other cooks, moving around each other in a dance they have perfected over countless years. Their kitchen is enormous, filled with industrial-sized stoves, ovens large enough to roast entire animals, and counters covered with ingredients both recognizable and disturbing. The smell of cooking food fills the air, a mixture of roasting meat, boiling vegetables, an underlying rot that makes Six's empty stomach twist with both hunger and nausea. The chefs are fast despite their bulk, moving with surprising speed when they detect an intruder in their domain. They chase Six through the kitchen with cleavers and knives, their weapons raised high, their pale faces twisted with rage at this small creature who dares invade their workspace. Six must hide inside cabinets, behind counters, and within the narrow spaces between massive cooking equipment. The kitchen is filled with hazards beyond just the chefs themselves. Open flames from stovetops can burn Six if she gets too close. Pots of boiling water bubble and splash. Sharp knives and other cooking implements are scattered everywhere, ready to cut her if she falls or missteps. The floor is slippery with spilled food and grease, making every step treacherous. And everywhere are the ingredients for the feast being prepared upstairs. Meat and vegetables and other things Six tries very hard not to examine too closely. Six discovers other children in the kitchen, or rather what remains of them. Hanging from hooks like slabs of meat are the bodies of children who did not escape, prepared for cooking just like any other ingredient. Six freezes when she first sees this, her mind struggling to comprehend the horror before her eyes. The maw does not just imprison children or torture them. It feeds children to the guests upstairs, processing them like livestock, cooking them into the elaborate meals that the wealthy passengers consume with such enthusiasm. This is the terrible truth at the heart of the maw, the purpose for which the entire ship exists. The guests in their endless hunger do not care what they eat, only that they are constantly fed, and the maw provides them with the most forbidden feast imaginable. The hunger strikes Six again while she is hiding from the chefs, and this time it is worse than ever before. She clutches her stomach, bending double with pain, her vision swimming and darkening at the edges. She needs food immediately or she will collapse, will be found by the chefs and added to their menu. Desperately, she searches her hiding spot and finds a piece of sausage that has fallen behind a counter. She grabs it and eats frantically, barely chewing, just shoving the food into her mouth as fast as she can. The sausage helps but is not enough, the hunger still gnawing at her insides like a living thing. Six realizes with growing horror that normal food is no longer enough to satisfy whatever is wrong inside her. She needs more, something the regular scraps cannot provide. But she does not know what that something is. After escaping the twin chefs through clever use of the kitchen's many hiding spots and a desperate final dash through a freezer filled with hanging meat, Six rides an elevator upward toward the maw's upper levels. The elevator seems to take forever, creaking and groaning as it rises through the ship's interior, carrying Six away from the kitchens and toward something new. When the doors finally open, she steps out into a corridor that is vastly different from anything she has seen before. The walls here are covered with fine wood paneling and expensive wallpaper. Paintings hang in golden frames, depicting scenes of luxury and excess. Thick carpets muffle her footsteps. Six has left the working areas of the maw and entered the sections meant for guests, and the contrast is shocking. Down below, everything was dirty and mechanical, designed for function rather than beauty. Up here, everything is elegant and refined, though there is something deeply wrong about the beauty, a falseness that makes it even more disturbing than the honest horror of the levels below. Six follows corridors and climbs stairs, always moving upward, until she reaches a massive dining hall that seems to stretch on forever. This is where the guests of the maw gather to feed, and what Six sees here will haunt her forever. The dining hall is filled with enormous tables piled high with food of every description. Roasted meats, fresh vegetables, elaborate desserts, and countless other dishes cover every available surface. And seated at these tables, eating with desperate abandon, are the guests themselves. These creatures were once human. Six can see traces of humanity in their basic shape, but they have transformed into something monstrous through their endless consumption. The guests are grotesquely fat, their bodies bloated to impossible proportions, their skin pale and stretched tight over their bulk. They wear fine clothes that barely fit their swollen forms, tuxedos and evening gowns that are torn and stained with food. Most disturbing of all, the guests are masked, wearing white ceramic faces that hide whatever features lie beneath, making them all look identical in their terrible anonymity. The guests eat without stopping, cramming food into their mouths with both hands, barely pausing to breathe or swallow. When one dish is emptied, they simply reach for another, their hunger never satisfied no matter how much they consume. Food falls from their mouths, drips down their chins, stains their clothes, but they do not care. They exist only to eat, their entire beings focused on the single act of consumption. And when Six makes a noise or moves into their line of sight, they reach for her with the same enthusiasm they show for the food, unable or unwilling to distinguish between a child and another dish to be devoured. Six must navigate through this nightmare carefully, moving between the tables while avoiding the grasping hands of the guests. They are slow and clumsy due to their enormous size, but they are also persistent and numerous. If Six gets caught, she will be grabbed by dozens of hands and pulled toward hungry mouths ready to bite into her flesh. She climbs over tables, knocking over plates and glasses in her haste, the sound drawing more guests toward her. She hides under tables, watching the thick legs of the guests shuffle past, their feet squeezed into shoes that can barely contain them. The entire experience is suffocating and claustrophobic despite the huge size of the dining hall, because the guests fill every space with their bulk, leaving little room for anything else. As Six moves through the dining hall, the hunger hits her again with devastating force. She has been fighting it throughout her journey, trying to push it down and ignore it. But up here, surrounded by so much food, the smell of the feast overwhelming her senses, she cannot resist any longer. Six sees a piece of meat on one of the tables, a small portion that has somehow been overlooked by the feeding guests. She grabs it and eats desperately, stuffing it into her mouth, but it is not enough. The hunger is growing stronger, changing into something darker. Six looks around the dining hall with new eyes, and for a moment she sees the guests not as monsters to be feared, but as food to be consumed. The thought terrifies her, but she cannot push it away. Something is very wrong inside her, something connected to the maw itself, and it is getting worse. Six eventually escapes the dining hall by finding passages that lead deeper into the maw's upper sections, areas that even the guests do not enter. These are the private quarters, the administrative areas where the true power behind the maw resides. Six has survived the leeches, the janitor, the twin chefs, and the guest dining hall, but her greatest challenge still awaits. She is about to meet the lady, the mysterious figure who controls the maw and oversees its terrible operations. The lady's quarters are beautiful and disturbing in equal measure, filled with elegant furniture, fine fabrics, and countless mirrors that reflect Six image back at her from every angle. The lady herself is unlike any creature Six has encountered so far because the lady still appears mostly human, or at least she maintains the illusion of humanity better than the others. She is tall and thin, wearing an elaborate kimono-like outfit and a white geisha mask that completely conceals her face. The lady moves with grace and purpose through her chambers, performing strange rituals that Six does not understand. But there is power emanating from the lady, dark magic or some other force that makes the air around her shimmer and bend. Six quickly learns that she cannot let the lady see her directly because the lady's gaze is deadly. When the lady looks at a living thing, that creature begins to wither and turn to ash, consumed by the dark power flowing through the lady's masked face. Six must use the mirrors scattered throughout the lady's quarters to navigate, watching the lady's reflection to track her movements while staying out of direct line of sight. The tension during this section is immense because mistakes are instantly fatal. If Six emerges from hiding at the wrong moment, if she misjudges the lady's position, if she makes a sound that draws attention, the lady's terrible gaze will fall upon her and Six will die screaming as her body turns to dust. The lady's quarters reveal much about the power structure of the maw. This is not just a ship that exists by accident or that grew into horror naturally. The lady is deliberately maintaining the maw, using her dark powers to keep the ship running and the guests satisfied. She is the heart of the operation, the source from which all the corruption flows. The other monsters, the janitor and the chefs and even the guests themselves, are merely servants or victims of the lady's design. She has created this floating hell for purposes that remain unclear, though power and survival seem to be central motivations. Perhaps she feeds on the despair and death that fills the maw, Or perhaps she is herself trapped here, forced to maintain the ship for some master we never see. Six and the lady eventually confront each other directly in the lady's private chamber, a room filled with mirrors and dominated by a strange portal or gateway that seems to be the source of the lady's power. The lady has been aware of Six's presence for some time, has been hunting her through the upper levels, and now the chase is over. The two face each other, the small child in the yellow raincoat and the tall, elegant figure in the white mask, and for a moment there is something like recognition between them. They are not so different, these two, both survivors in a world of monsters, both driven by hungers they cannot fully control. But this moment of understanding passes quickly, replaced by the necessity of survival. The lady attacks with her deadly gaze, and Six must dodge and hide, using the mirrors to avoid being seen directly while trying to find a way to defeat this seemingly invincible enemy. The battle between Six and the lady reaches its climax when Six discovers that she can use the lady's own powers against her. The mirrors scattered throughout the chamber are not just decorative, but serve a purpose in the lady's magic, reflecting and amplifying her power. Six realizes that if she can break one of these mirrors while the lady is looking into it, the deadly gaze will be reflected back upon its source. With desperate courage, Six executes this plan, luring the lady close to a large mirror and then smashing it at the crucial moment. The lady's scream fills the chamber as her own power turns against her, her body beginning to wither and crack. But Six does not run away as the lady collapses. Instead, something dark and terrible overtakes her. The hunger that has been growing throughout her entire journey suddenly explodes with overwhelming force, and Six can no longer resist or ignore it. She approaches the lady's fallen form, and despite the lady's attempts to crawl away, Six grabs her. What happens next is both horrifying and transformative. Six bites into the lady, consuming her, draining her life and power in a way that goes beyond simple eating. This is not about food or survival anymore. Six is absorbing the lady's essence, taking in her dark magic and making it her own. The lady struggles and screams, her elegant mask cracking and falling away to reveal the withered face beneath. But Six does not stop until the lady is nothing but an empty husk on the floor. When Six finally finishes and stands up, she is changed. The hunger is satisfied at last, filled by something that normal food could never provide. But Six has lost something crucial in the process. Her innocence, whatever small amount remained after everything she endured, is gone completely. She has become something more than just a survivor now. She has become a predator, a being with dark powers flowing through her small body. Six can feel the lady's abilities within her now, the power to drain life from others, the strength that comes from consuming souls rather than flesh. As Six walks through the lady's chambers and toward the Maw's exit, she passes by the guests who are still eating in the dining hall below. They do not threaten her anymore because they can sense the change in her, can feel the dark power she now carries. Six walks calmly through the dining hall, and the guests part before her like water flowing around a stone. They are afraid of her now, these massive creatures who eat children without thought or mercy. Afraid of this tiny girl in a yellow raincoat who has defeated the master of the Maw and taken her power. Some of the guests reach toward her as she passes, not to grab her but almost in supplication, as if begging for something they cannot name. Six ignores them all, her dark eyes fixed on the exit ahead. Six finds a small lifeboat and escapes the Maw, rowing away from the massive ship as it continues its endless voyage across the dark ocean. She looks back once at the vessel that has been her prison and her proving ground, seeing its lights glowing in the darkness, hearing the faint sounds of the guests still eating inside. Part of her knows that she should feel relief or happiness at her escape, but she feels nothing but the cold satisfaction of the hunger finally being quiet. Six has survived the Maw, but the cost of that survival has been her humanity. She is free, but she is also forever changed, carrying darkness inside her that will never fully go away. As the small boat drifts into the fog and the Maw disappears behind her, Six does not think about what she has lost but only about what she has gained. She is no longer weak or helpless. She is powerful now, and the world beyond the Maw will soon learn to fear the girl in the yellow raincoat. While Six's story was unfolding on the Maw, In a completely different place but perhaps the same nightmarish world, another child was fighting his own battle for survival. His name is Mono, and his journey begins in a forest that should not exist, where the trees are twisted and dead, where the fog is so thick you cannot see more than a few feet in any direction, and where the very air feels wrong, as if reality itself is broken and decaying. Mono wears a paper bag over his head with 2 holes cut for eyes, hiding his face from the world and perhaps from himself. He is alone at first, wandering through the forest without clear memory of how he arrived here or what came before. All Mono knows is that he must keep moving forward, that staying still means death, and that somewhere ahead lies a massive structure that calls to him in ways he does not understand. This is the world beneath the signal tower, and it is just as horrible as the Maw but in completely different ways. The signal tower rises above the pale city like a dark finger pointing toward the sky, visible from miles away even through the thick fog that blankets everything. The tower broadcasts constantly, sending out television and radio signals that penetrate every building and every home, signals that carry corruption and madness to everyone who receives them. The world under the tower's influence has fallen into a nightmare state where reality bends according to the tower's will. Television sets are everywhere, playing static and distorted images that mesmerize anyone who watches them. The people who once lived normal lives in the Pale City have been reduced to hollow shells, their eyes glued to screens, their bodies thin and withered from neglect. The tower feeds on them somehow, draining their essence through the very broadcasts they cannot stop watching. Mono discovers early in his journey that he has an unusual ability. He can travel through television sets, moving from one screen to another as if the televisions are doorways to someplace else. This power will prove crucial to his survival, allowing him to escape danger and reach places that would otherwise be inaccessible. But the televisions are also dangerous, their screens showing him visions and memories that may or may not be real, glimpses of the tower's past and perhaps of his own forgotten history. Every time Mono enters a television, he risks losing himself in the static-filled void between screens, becoming trapped in the nowhere place that the tower controls. As Mono explores the forest and the areas beyond, he encounters various threats that test his courage and cunning. There are the hunter, a twisted figure with a shotgun who stalks the forest looking for small prey to kill and stuff as trophies. There are the mannequins, which should be harmless plastic figures but move when Mono is not looking directly at them, creeping closer with jerky, unnatural movements until they can grab him with their stiff hands. There are the patients in the hospital, bloated creatures that crawl along the floors and ceilings, their skin pulled tight and their bodies filled with something that should not be inside a human being. And everywhere are the televisions, always broadcasting, always watching, always pulling at Mono's mind and trying to draw him into their screens permanently. Mono's journey takes a dramatic turn when he discovers he is not alone in this nightmare world. While exploring a house at the edge of the forest, a building filled with dead bodies and hunting trophies, Mono finds a girl trapped in a small room. She is sitting on the floor, her knees pulled up to her chest, and she is wearing a yellow raincoat that stands out against the gray and brown tones of everything around her. This is Six, though Mono does not know her name yet. He only knows that here is another child, another survivor, and perhaps together they can escape this terrible place. Six is suspicious at first, wary of this strange boy with a paper bag on his head. She has learned not to trust anyone, learned that other people only bring danger and betrayal. But Mono is patient, and slowly Six begins to understand that he means her no harm. When the hunter attacks, crashing through the walls with his shotgun blazing, Six and Mono are forced to work together to survive. They run through the house, dodging bullets and falling debris, helping each other climb over obstacles and squeeze through narrow spaces. This shared danger creates a bond between them, a connection neither child has felt before. By the time they escape the hunter's house and flee into the forest beyond, Six and Mono have become partners. Together, Six and Mono journey through the nightmare world toward the Pale City and the signal tower that dominates it. Their partnership is unique in this dark place because they actually help each other rather than seeing each other as competition or threats. Mono is stronger and can fight when necessary, using broken pieces of wood or metal pipes as weapons. Six is smaller and faster, able to fit through tight spaces and climb to high places. When one of them is in danger, the other comes to help. When they face obstacles that require two people to overcome, they work together seamlessly. They do not speak much, communication between them happening mostly through gestures and looks, but there is understanding. They have both suffered, both been hunted and terrified, and both know that alone they will die, but together they might survive. The forest gives way to more civilized areas, though civilization has been twisted beyond recognition by the tower's influence. Six and Mono cross through a schoolhouse where the students have become violent bullies who hunt in packs, their heads covered with paper bags or porcelain faces, their behavior gone from mischievous to murderous. The teacher who oversees the school is a nightmarish figure with a neck that can extend to impossible lengths, allowing her to peer into every corner and catch any child who misbehaves. Six and Mono must sneak through classrooms and hallways, avoiding the hunting packs of bullies while staying out of sight from the teacher's all-seeing gaze. They cross through a hospital next, a place of medicine and healing that has become a chamber of horrors. The patients crawl through the corridors, their movements jerky and wrong. The doctor pursues them through the morgue and surgery rooms, his body hanging from the ceiling on pulleys and chains, his hands wielding scalpels and saws. Six and Mono barely escape with their lives, working together to drop heavy objects on the doctor and trap him long enough to run. Every location they pass through is another nightmare, another layer of corruption spread by the tower's evil influence. Six and Mono eventually reach the Pale City itself, and here the true extent of the tower's power becomes clear. The city should be bustling with life, filled with people going about their daily business. Instead, it is a ghost town where the buildings stand empty and the streets are silent, except for the constant buzzing of television static that fills the air. What few citizens remain are barely human anymore, thin figures who sit motionless in front of television screens, their eyes wide and unblinking, their bodies wasting away from starvation and neglect. These are the viewers, people who have been completely consumed by the tower's broadcasts. They no longer eat or sleep or think about anything except the images on their screens. When Six and Mono enter their homes, the viewers do not notice or care. The children can walk right past them, can even touch them, and the viewers continue staring at their televisions as if nothing else in the world exists. But if Six or Mono interfere with the television signal, if they block the screen or turn off the power, the viewers become violent with shocking speed. They attack with desperate fury, grabbing at the children with their thin arms, trying to kill them for disrupting the broadcasts that have become their entire reason for existence. The Pale City is filled with such horrors, each block revealing new nightmares. Six and Mono explore apartment buildings where entire families sit motionless in front of televisions, their bodies so thin that their bones show through their skin. They cross through shopping districts where mannequins stand in store windows, and it becomes impossible to tell which figures are plastic and which were once human. They navigate through playgrounds and parks that have fallen into decay, the equipment rusted and broken, the plants all dead and gray. The entire city is dying, rotting from the inside out, poisoned by the tower's influence and unable to break free. At the center of all this decay stands the signal tower itself, a massive concrete structure that seems to go up forever, its top disappearing into the gray clouds above. The tower broadcasts constantly, its signal reaching every corner of the Pale City and beyond. Six and Mono know that they must reach the tower, though neither of them fully understands why. Something about the tower calls to them, pulls them forward with irresistible force. Perhaps it holds the key to escaping this nightmare world. Perhaps inside they will find answers to questions they have not even formed yet. Or perhaps the tower is simply the source of all the evil surrounding them, and if they can destroy it, they can break the spell that has corrupted everything. As Six and Mono make their way toward the tower through the city streets, they are pursued by the most dangerous enemy they have faced yet. This is the Thin Man, a tall figure in a hat and suit who appears and disappears without warning, moving through the television screens scattered throughout the city. The Thin Man is hunting Six specifically, reaching for her with long arms that can stretch across entire rooms, his presence announced by the static that fills the air and the distortion of reality around him. Mono tries to protect Six, pulling her away when the Thin Man appears, helping her hide and escape. But the Thin Man is relentless and patient, and he always knows where they are going because the tower tells him everything. Six and Mono's partnership faces its greatest test when the Thin Man finally corners them in an apartment building near the tower. Mono fights to protect Six, using his ability to travel through televisions to distract the Thin Man while Six runs. But the Thin Man is too powerful, and despite Mono's best efforts, Six is captured. The Thin Man grabs Six and pulls her into the television screen, taking her away to someplace Mono cannot immediately follow. For the first time since they met, Mono is alone again, and the loss is devastating. He has come to depend on Six's presence, to draw strength from their partnership. Without her, he is just a small boy in a paper bag facing an enemy that can bend reality itself. But Mono does not give up. He cannot abandon Six after everything they have been through together. Instead, he pushes forward with renewed determination, fighting through hordes of viewers and dodging the mannequins that have come to life throughout the Pale City. Mono eventually finds a way into the signal tower itself, entering through a door that opens only for him, as if the tower has been waiting for his arrival. Inside, the tower is vast and strange, its architecture defying normal physics. Hallways stretch in impossible directions. Rooms loop back on themselves. Gravity seems optional in some areas. And throughout it all, the televisions continue broadcasting, their screens showing static and distorted images that hurt to look at directly. Mono searches through the tower's many levels, calling for Six, desperate to find her and escape together. He eventually discovers her in a high room, but what he finds breaks his heart. Six has been transformed by her time in the tower's power. She is no longer the small girl in the yellow raincoat but has become something monstrous. Her body stretched and distorted, her features twisted. Six does not recognize Mono, or if she does, she no longer cares. She has been broken by whatever the tower did to her, reduced to a mindless creature that only wants to be left alone with the music box that has become her obsession. Mono must fight to free Six from the tower's corruption, chasing her through the strange rooms while dodging her attacks and trying to destroy the music box that holds her captive. This section is heartbreaking because Mono must hurt the one person he cares about in order to save her. He smashes the music box piece by piece, and with each blow Six becomes more frantic and desperate, screaming and crying, trying to stop him. But Mono persists because he knows this is the only way. When the music box is finally destroyed completely, Six returns to her normal form, small and human once more. She looks at Mono with recognition, and for a moment it seems like everything will be okay. They have freed Six from the tower's corruption, and now they can escape together. But their victory is short-lived because the Thin Man returns, appearing in the room with them, his tall form dominating the space. The final confrontation between Mono and the Thin Man is intense and desperate. Mono discovers that he can use the tower's own power against the Thin Man, channeling the television signals through himself and turning them into weapons. The battle rages through multiple rooms, reality bending and breaking around them, until finally Mono succeeds in defeating the Thin Man. The tall figure collapses, his body breaking apart into static and shadow, and Mono stands victorious. But there is no time to celebrate because the tower itself begins to collapse, the structure losing cohesion without the Thin Man to maintain it. Six and Mono run through the disintegrating corridors, the floors crumbling beneath their feet, the walls closing in around them. They race toward the exit, toward freedom and the world outside. They can see daylight ahead, the opening growing closer. They are going to make it. They are going to escape together. Six and Mono reach the exit with the tower collapsing around them. They jump across a large gap, and Mono barely makes it to the other side, his fingers catching the edge of the platform. He dangles over the void below, the broken pieces of the tower falling past him into darkness. Six lands safely on the far side and turns back. Mono reaches up toward her, his hand extended, asking for help. Their eyes meet, and in that moment everything that has passed between them seems to hang in the balance. Six has escaped the tower's immediate corruption, returned to her normal form, and stands between Mono and survival. All she has to do is reach down and pull him up, and they will escape together as partners, as friends, as two children who survived the impossible. But Six does not reach down. Instead, she looks at Mono with an expression that is difficult to read, something between sadness and calculation, fear and determination. And then she lets go. She releases Mono's hand and steps back, leaving him to fall. Mono's expression shows complete shock and betrayal as he drops away from the edge, his small form tumbling into the darkness below. Six watches him fall, then turns and walks away without looking back, escaping the tower alone while Mono plunges into the depths. This moment is the most devastating in the entire story because it represents the ultimate betrayal of trust. Mono and Six had built something together, a partnership born from shared suffering and mutual protection. Mono had risked everything to save Six from the tower's corruption, had fought through impossible dangers to free her. And at the moment when he needed her most, when one simple action would have saved him, Six chose to let him fall. The reasons for Six's betrayal are not explicitly stated, left open to interpretation. Perhaps she blamed Mono for the suffering she endured in the tower, since it was his journey that brought her here. Perhaps she saw something in him that frightened her, some hint of the darkness he might become. Perhaps the corruption from the tower had not completely left her, and some part of her had been twisted toward cruelty. Or perhaps Six was simply following the survival instinct that had kept her alive on the Maw, the cold calculation that said caring about others is weakness and that she must save herself at any cost. Whatever the reason, the result is the same. Mono falls into the darkness of the tower, and the structure collapses completely around him. But Mono does not die. Instead, he finds himself trapped in a room deep within the tower's heart, a small space with a chair and a television, a prison from which there is no escape. Time passes in strange ways in this place, weeks becoming months becoming years. Mono sits in the chair, growing taller as the years pass, his body stretching upward while his prison remains the same size. His clothes change, the paper bag is replaced by a hat, his simple shirt and pants become a suit. The tower feeds on him, drawing power from his pain and betrayal, using his imprisonment to fuel the broadcasts that corrupt the world above. Mono grows into the Thin Man, the creature who has been hunting Six throughout their entire journey. The cycle is complete, a loop that feeds back on itself. The Thin Man was hunting Six because he was Mono, trying to save his past self from the betrayal that created him. By capturing Six and transforming her in the tower, the Thin Man was trying to prevent her from betraying Mono at the critical moment. But his interference is what drove Six to let go, creating the very betrayal he was trying to prevent. It is a time loop with no beginning or end, each cycle creating the circumstances that necessitate the next cycle, an eternal prison of cause and effect from which neither Six nor Mono can escape. To understand the full horror of Little Nightmares, we must look at what the Maw and the Signal Tower represent beyond just their physical structures. These are not simply locations where bad things happen. They are manifestations of human corruption taken to its ultimate extreme, monuments to the darkest aspects of human nature. The Maw represents consumption and appetite gone mad, the endless hunger that can never be satisfied no matter how much it devours. The guests who feast eternally in its dining halls are humanity stripped of everything except the desire to consume. They do not care about family or love or achievement. They do not create or build or learn. They exist only to eat, to fill themselves with more and more, their bodies growing grotesque as their appetites grow beyond all reason. The Maw shows us what happens when gluttony becomes the defining characteristic of a society, when the rich and powerful consume without thought for those they devour, when children are treated as just another resource to be processed and served. Every part of the Maw's structure supports this endless consumption. The janitor captures children to feed the machine. The chefs prepare them for the feast. The lady maintains the system with her dark powers. And the guests eat without questions or conscience, forever hungry despite being impossibly full. The Maw is a critique of consumer culture taken to its horrible conclusion, a warning about what happens when material satisfaction becomes the only goal and when the strong devour the weak without mercy or hesitation. The hunger that afflicts Six throughout her journey on the Maw is both literal and metaphorical. She needs food to survive, but the hunger represents something deeper, the corruption that the Maw spreads to everyone within its walls. By the end of her journey, Six has consumed the lady and taken her power, but in doing so she has become part of the Ma's cycle. She has learned to devour others to empower herself, has discovered that the ultimate satisfaction comes not from normal food but from consuming the essence of other beings. Six escapes the Ma physically, but spiritually she carries it with her, the hunger never truly satisfied. The signal tower represents a different kind of corruption, the control and manipulation of reality through media and broadcasts. The tower uses television signals to dominate the minds of everyone in the Pale City, turning thinking individuals into mindless viewers who cannot break free from the screens. This is a critique of media culture and the ways that constant exposure to television, internet, and other broadcasts can numb people to reality, making them passive consumers of content rather than active participants in life. The citizens of the Pale City have literally wasted away in front of their televisions, their bodies dying while their minds remain trapped in the illusion of the broadcasts. The tower feeds on this control, drawing power from the people it has enslaved. Like the Ma consumes children's bodies, the tower consumes adults' minds and souls. The Thin Man serves the tower by maintaining its power and eliminating threats. The loop that traps Mono is the tower's way of ensuring its own continued existence, creating its own servant through time paradox and betrayal. Mono's transformation into the Thin Man represents the loss of childhood innocence and the corruption of someone who tried to be a hero. He wanted to save Six, to escape the nightmare world, to make things better. But the tower took his goodness and betrayed dreams and twisted them into something dark, turning the hero into the villain, the savior into the monster. Both the Ma and the tower are ultimately about cycles that perpetuate themselves. The Ma continues its voyages, always gathering new guests to feed and new children to serve them. The tower continues broadcasting, always finding new victims to watch its signals and new servants to maintain its power. Six and Mono are trapped in their own cycles, Six carrying the hunger forward into whatever comes next, Mono trapped in the time loop that transforms him into his own enemy. These cycles seem unbreakable because they are built on fundamental aspects of human nature that exist in all of us, the capacity for greed and the vulnerability to manipulation. Throughout the Little Nightmares story, children are the only truly sympathetic characters, and this choice is deliberate and meaningful. Six and Mono are small and vulnerable, equipped with no special weapons or abilities beyond their courage and cleverness. They face a world populated entirely by adults who have become monsters, and this creates a clear dynamic where childhood innocence confronts adult corruption. The children represent the small amount of good that remains in a world that has fallen completely into darkness. But the story does not present a simple tale of innocent children versus evil adults. Instead, it shows how the nightmare world corrupts even its youngest victims, turning them into survivors who must make terrible choices. Six begins her journey as a victim, a small girl trying to escape a horrible place. But by the end she has become something darker, willing to kill and consume others, willing to betray the one person who helped her. Mono starts as a hero, trying to save Six and defeat the monsters. But he is transformed into the Thin Man, becoming one of the very monsters he fought against. The children are symbols of lost innocence, but they also represent the ways that trauma and suffering can change people into things they never wanted to be. Other children appear throughout both stories, the runaway kids on the Ma and the various children Mono encounters in the Pale City. These children are all trying to survive, all running and hiding from the monsters that hunt them. But none of them make it very far. They are caught and killed, processed by the Ma or consumed by the tower's servants. Their deaths emphasize how dangerous this world is, how rare survival truly is, and how even the cleverest child cannot escape without extraordinary luck or perhaps extraordinary darkness within themselves. The fact that Six survives the Ma while other children die suggests that she has something they lack, a willingness to do whatever is necessary, including giving in to the dark hunger. The fact that Mono becomes trapped in the tower suggests that his heroism and goodness made him vulnerable, that trying to save others rather than just himself led to his downfall. The world of Little Nightmares does not reward traditional heroic virtues. Instead, it favors those who embrace survival at any cost, who are willing to become monsters themselves if that is what staying alive requires. This creates a deeply cynical worldview where goodness is punished and selfishness is rewarded, where caring about others leads to betrayal, and looking out only for yourself is the only rational choice. 6. Yellow Raincoat is significant because it makes her visible in the dark world she inhabits. While other children try to blend into shadows and hide from their pursuers, 6 stands out. The raincoat could represent her defiance, her refusal to completely disappear even in the face of overwhelming horror. Or it could represent her difference from other children, the fact that she carries something inside her that makes her both more likely to survive and more dangerous to those around her. By the end of the story, the yellow raincoat has become iconic not as a symbol of innocence, but as a symbol of survival through darkness. Mono's paper bag and later his hat serve a similar symbolic purpose. The paper bag hides his identity, suggesting shame or the desire to conceal his true self from the world. When the bag is eventually replaced by the hat as Mono transforms into the Thin Man, it represents the loss of his humanity and the adoption of a new, more sinister identity. The hat is professional and formal, suggesting that Mono has accepted his role in the tower system, has become part of the cycle rather than fighting against it. What makes Little Nightmares particularly disturbing is what it suggests about the wider world beyond the Maw and the Pale City. These locations are not isolated incidents or rare examples of corruption. Instead, they seem to be parts of a larger world that has fallen completely into nightmare. The Maw sails the open ocean, suggesting there are other ships and other places where similar horrors occur. The Pale City is just one city, implying there are others like it, or perhaps the tower's influence has spread even further. The people who become the guests on the Maw or the viewers in the Pale City were once normal humans living normal lives. Something changed them, some combination of their own dark desires and the corrupting influence of places like the Maw and the tower. This suggests that the nightmare world is not a separate dimension or fantasy realm but is actually our world after it has fallen into corruption. The recognizable elements, the televisions and schools and hospitals and dining halls, are all familiar because they come from our reality, just twisted into horrible shapes. This interpretation makes the story even more disturbing because it suggests that the monsters are what humans become when society collapses and the worst aspects of our nature are allowed to flourish unchecked. The adults have all transformed into creatures that represent their dominant traits taken to extreme. The janitor represents authority and imprisonment. The chefs represent service and preparation. The teacher represents education twisted into control. The doctor represents medicine become torture. And the guests and viewers represent ordinary people who have given themselves over completely to their basest desires. If this world is our world's future or an alternate present, then Six and Mono are among the last children who still possess any humanity, and their fates suggest that even they cannot escape corruption. Six becomes a creature of hunger who feeds on others. Mono becomes trapped in a cycle where he transforms into a monster. There is no hope in this world, no suggestion that things will improve or that the nightmare can be defeated. The best anyone can do is survive for a little while longer, and survival requires becoming something monstrous yourself. The game's creators have never fully explained the world's backstory or the reasons for its fallen state. This ambiguity is intentional, allowing players to fill in the gaps with their own interpretations and fears. Some viewers believe this world was always nightmarish, that it has existed in this corrupt state for so long that no one remembers anything different. Others think it represents a gradual fall, that the world slowly decayed over generations as people gave in more and more to their dark impulses. Still others interpret it as metaphorical, suggesting that the nightmare world represents how children experience adult society, seeing the consumption and control and corruption that adults have learned to ignore or justify. The lack of clear explanation makes the world more frightening because there are no rules we can depend on, no history we can reference to understand what is happening or why. We are as lost and confused as Six and Mono, dropped into a nightmare without context, forced to navigate based only on immediate threats and our desperate desire to survive. This mirrors the experience of actual childhood trauma, where children often do not understand why terrible things are happening, only that they must escape or endure. The twin themes that run through all of Little Nightmares are hunger and control, the two main expressions of corruption in this fallen world. Hunger drives the Maw and everyone on it. The guests hunger for food and eat without stopping. The lady hungers for power and uses her dark magic to maintain control. Six hungers for survival and eventually for something darker she cannot name. This hunger is never satisfied no matter how much is consumed because it has gone beyond normal appetite into something compulsive and destructive. The hunger becomes the identity of those who feel it, defining their actions and desires until nothing else matters. Six hunger is particularly important because it starts as something sympathetic, just a small girl who needs food to survive, but gradually transforms into something monstrous. When Six eats the rat in the depths of the maw, it is disturbing but understandable given her desperate situation. When she eats the lady at the end, consuming her essence and taking her power, it crosses a line into true horror. The hunger has evolved from survival need into predatory appetite, from consuming food into consuming souls. This transformation shows how the nightmare world corrupts even those who resist it, how survival in hell requires becoming a demon yourself. Control drives the tower and the Pale City. The broadcasts control the minds of the viewers, making them into willing slaves who cannot break free even as they waste away. The Thin Man controls reality itself, moving through televisions and bending the world according to the tower's needs. The various monsters like the Teacher and Doctor control the children in their domains, enforcing rules and punishing disobedience with death. Control in this world is absolute and suffocating, leaving no room for freedom or individual choice. Those who are controlled become less than human, reduced to simple functions serving the system that dominates them. Mono's struggle throughout his journey is against control, trying to maintain his autonomy and freedom in a world that wants to trap him. His ultimate fate is to become trapped completely, imprisoned in the tower and transformed into an agent of control himself. The Thin Man represents what Mono becomes when he loses his freedom, when he accepts his role in the system and begins enforcing control rather than resisting it. The time loop ensures that Mono can never escape this fate, that his destiny is to become the very thing he fought against, completing the cycle that will trap his younger self in turn. Hunger and control are connected in the nightmare world because both represent the loss of humanity and the triumph of dark impulses over reason and compassion. The hungry can never stop eating because their appetite has replaced all other desires. The controlled can never break free because the broadcasts have replaced their ability to think independently. And those who try to resist, like Six and Mono, are eventually absorbed into the systems they fought against, becoming hungry predators or controlled servants depending on which nightmare they encounter. These themes resonate beyond the story itself because they reflect real anxieties about modern life. We live in a world of overconsumption where people constantly want more despite having abundance. We live in a world of mass media where screens dominate our attention and shape our thoughts. The nightmare world of Little Nightmares takes these real concerns and amplifies them to horrifying extremes, showing us a possible future where the problems we currently struggle with have grown so large they have consumed civilization itself. The guests eating forever on the maw are us taken to our worst extreme. The viewers staring at screens in the Pale City are us in our most passive state. And Six and Mono are the children who inherit this broken world and must somehow survive despite having no power and no hope. Little Nightmares achieves its horror not through jump scares or gore, but through atmosphere and implication, creating a sense of dread that permeates every moment. The visual design of both the Maw and the Pale City is crucial to this effect. Everything is slightly wrong, proportions distorted, colors muted or overly saturated, details that should be familiar twisted into unsettling shapes. The Maw is full of long corridors that seem to stretch forever, rooms that are too large or too small, and machinery that operates with threatening purpose. The Pale City is gray and lifeless, its buildings leaning at odd angles, its streets empty except for the static hum of televisions playing behind every window. The sound design enhances the horror through careful use of ambient noise, music, and silence. The creaking of the Maw's metal hull creates constant tension as players navigate its depths. The footsteps of the monsters echo through corridors, warning of approaching danger. The sound of the guests eating in the dining hall is particularly revolting, a wet smacking and chewing that emphasizes their gluttony. In the Pale City, the constant buzz of television static fills the air, punctuated by the distorted sounds of broadcasts and the shuffle of viewers moving toward their screens. The music is minimal but effective, using strings and percussion to build tension during chase sequences, and falling into silence during stealth sections where every sound Six and Mono make could give them away. The scale and perspective in Little Nightmares emphasize the vulnerability of the child protagonists. Six and Mono are tiny compared to the monsters that hunt them and the environments they must navigate. Doors are massive obstacles that require great effort to open. Tables and counters tower overhead, requiring careful climbing to scale. The monsters are not just dangerous but physically overwhelming, their hands large enough to completely engulf the children's bodies, their legs long enough to cover distances in a few strides that take the children many desperate seconds to cross. This scale makes every encounter feel hopeless, every escape feel like a miracle. The game's creators used this size difference to create a childlike perspective on the world, where adults and their spaces feel enormous and threatening. The lighting throughout both locations creates deep shadows and highlights, giving the environments a stark, expressionistic quality. Light sources are rare and often uncertain. Flickering candles, failing electric bulbs, dim daylight filtering through dirty windows. The darkness is not just an absence of light but feels like an active presence, something thick and suffocating that hides unknowable dangers. Six's yellow raincoat provides a spot of color that draws the eye, making her visible to both the player and the monsters, creating tension through the impossibility of hiding completely. Mono's darker clothing helps him blend into shadows better, but his paper bag makes him stand out in its own way, a pale shape in the darkness. The character design of the monsters is disturbing because they are recognizable as human but distorted beyond humanity. The janitor's impossibly long arms, the chef's bloated bodies, the teacher's extending neck, the doctor hanging from the ceiling, all of these are human features taken to nightmarish extremes. The guests are perhaps the most disturbing because they are closest to normal human shape, just obscenely fat and hidden behind blank masks, suggesting that ordinary people can become monsters through nothing more than excess and anonymity. The Thin Man is disturbing in the opposite way, being too thin and too tall, his proportions wrong in ways that make him seem like a human being stretched on a rack until breaking point. The story of Little Nightmares is deliberately ambiguous, leaving many questions unanswered and many details open to interpretation. This ambiguity has led to extensive discussion and theorizing among those who have experienced the story, with different viewers finding different meanings in the same events. One popular interpretation sees the entire story as a metaphor for childhood trauma and the loss of innocence. In this reading, the Maw and the Tower represent the adult world as seen through the eyes of children who are being abused or neglected. The monsters are adult authority figures who hurt children rather than protecting them. The grotesque exaggeration of these figures reflects how children perceive their abusers, as overwhelming and inhuman threats against which they have no power. Six and Mono represent children trying to survive in an environment that is hostile to their existence, forced to become hard and cruel themselves in order to escape being destroyed. Six hunger might represent the emotional emptiness that comes from trauma, a void inside that cannot be filled no matter what is consumed. Mono's betrayal and transformation might represent how trauma victims can become perpetrators themselves, the cycle of abuse continuing as damaged children grow into damaged adults who hurt the next generation. Another interpretation focuses on social criticism, seeing the Maw as a critique of capitalism and class inequality. The wealthy guests consume endlessly while children are literally processed as food to satisfy their appetites. The workers on the Maw, the janitor and chefs, are deformed by their servitude, their bodies warped by the functions they perform for the rich. The lady sits at the top of the hierarchy, maintaining the system through power and magic, benefiting from the suffering below while remaining elegant and refined. In this reading, Six's journey represents the struggle to escape poverty and oppression, with her ultimate consumption of the lady representing revolution or the overthrow of the ruling class. But the fact that Six takes on the lady's powers and becomes something dark herself suggests that revolution merely replaces one oppressor with another, that power inevitably corrupts those who wield it. The Tower can be interpreted as a critique of media culture and the modern surveillance state. The broadcasts control the population by keeping them distracted and passive, staring at screens rather than living real lives. The Tower sees everything through its many television feeds, maintaining control through constant observation. The Thin Man represents corporate or government power, a faceless authority that enforces the system's rules and eliminates those who resist. Mono's journey represents the individual trying to break free from media control, with his ultimate imprisonment suggesting that true escape is impossible because the system is too powerful and too pervasive. Some interpretations focus on the time loop and paradox elements, seeing the story as a tragedy about fate and destiny. Mono is trapped in a cycle where his own future self creates the circumstances that doom his past self, with no clear beginning or end to the loop. This can be read as a meditation on determinism versus free will, questioning whether we can truly change our fates or if we are all trapped in cycles determined by forces beyond our control. 6. Betrayal of Mono might be inevitable, something she was always going to do because it had already happened from the perspective of the loop. This reading suggests that the characters are not truly making choices but are playing out roles that have been determined by the structure of time itself, adding an extra layer of tragedy to their suffering. Religious and mythological interpretations see the Maw and the Tower as underworld or hell realms, places of punishment and testing where souls are stripped of their humanity. 6 and Mono are souls trying to escape damnation, facing trials that test their moral character. 6 fails her test by giving in to the hunger and consuming the lady, while Mono fails his test by trusting 6 and being betrayed. Their fates represent different forms of damnation. 6 condemned to eternal hunger, Mono condemned to eternal imprisonment and repetition. The lady and the thin man might be devils or demons, rulers of these hell realms who corrupt and torture the souls in their power. While 6's journey through the Maw and Mono's journey through the Pale City are separate stories that can stand alone, they are connected in important ways that enhance both tales. The most obvious connection is 6 herself, who appears in both stories at different points in her timeline. The 6 who helps Mono in the Pale City is the same 6 who will later escape the Maw, though the chronological order is not entirely clear. Some evidence suggests that the Pale City events happen before the Maw, making 6's time with Mono a prequel to her journey on the ship. Other evidence suggests the opposite, that 6 meets Mono after escaping the Maw, making her betrayal of him a continuation of the dark path she began when she consumed the lady. The ambiguity of the timeline is intentional, allowing both interpretations to coexist. If the Pale City comes first, then 6's betrayal of Mono represents an early step in her corruption, the moment when she chooses survival over friendship and begins the descent that will lead to her consuming the lady. Her time on the Maw becomes a continuation of this darkness, with the hunger growing stronger throughout her journey until it consumes her completely. If the Maw comes first, then 6 has already been corrupted by the time she meets Mono, already carrying the lady's powers and the dark hunger within her. Her betrayal of Mono is not a surprising turn but an inevitable expression of what she has become. She cannot save Mono because she has already lost the capacity for compassion and sacrifice that such an act would require. Either way, the connection between the stories emphasizes that 6 is not a simple hero but a complex and morally ambiguous character. The raincoat that serves as 6's trademark appears in both stories and may be more significant than just a piece of clothing. Some interpret the raincoat as a symbol that is passed from child to child, with 6 taking it from another girl and perhaps passing it on to someone else in the future. This would make the raincoat represent the role of survivor or protagonist, suggesting that 6 herself is not unique, but is simply the latest child to take on this identity. Others see the raincoat as specifically 6 throughout, making it her personal symbol and suggesting that she is indeed the same individual across both stories despite the ambiguous timeline. Mono's connection to the Thin Man creates a direct link between his story and the tower's existence. The time loop means that Mono is both victim and perpetrator, both the child trying to escape the nightmare and the monster maintaining it. This loop might extend further than just Mono's personal story, suggesting that the entire nightmare world exists in a temporal loop where the effects create the causes in an endless cycle. If the tower created the Thin Man who is Mono, and Mono's experiences led him to become the Thin Man, then the tower's existence depends on the loop continuing forever. Breaking the loop might destroy the tower, but the loop seems to be self-sustaining, with no clear way to break it. The nightmare world itself is the ultimate connection between the stories, the setting that encompasses both the Maw and the Pale City. This world has fallen into corruption, with the Maw representing one expression of that corruption through consumption and the tower representing another through control. Other locations surely exist in this nightmare world, other places where different aspects of human darkness have created new horrors. Six and Mono are just two children among many trying to survive in this fallen world, and their stories represent just two of countless tragedies playing out in the darkness. The fact that both children ultimately fail to truly escape or overcome their challenges suggests that the nightmare world is too powerful to be defeated by individuals, that the corruption has spread too far to be reversed. Little Nightmares has left a significant impact on horror storytelling through its unique approach to atmosphere, character, and theme. The story demonstrates that horror can be effective without relying on explicit violence or gore, that suggestion and implication can be more disturbing than graphic depiction. The silent protagonists allow viewers to project themselves into Six and Mono's roles, experiencing the nightmare directly rather than watching someone else's reactions. The environments tell stories through detail and design rather than exposition, trusting the audience to pick up on clues and draw their own conclusions. The artistic style of Little Nightmares has influenced other creators working in horror and dark fantasy. The combination of childlike protagonists and adult monsters has become more common in horror media, as has the use of exaggerated proportions and distorted perspectives to create unease. The color palette of muted grays and browns, punctuated by occasional bright colors, has been adopted by other works seeking to create similar atmospheres. The focus on environmental storytelling and visual narrative over dialogue has encouraged other creators to experiment with more show-than-tell approaches. The themes of childhood trauma, loss of innocence, and cycles of abuse have resonated strongly with audiences who see their own experiences reflected in Six and Mono's struggles. The story does not offer easy answers or comfortable resolutions, refusing to provide the catharsis of seeing the monsters defeated or the children saved. This refusal to provide false comfort makes the story more honest in its depiction of trauma, acknowledging that some wounds do not heal and some darkness cannot be overcome. The ambiguity of the story's meaning has kept discussions active, with new interpretations and theories constantly emerging. The deliberate gaps in explanation allow each viewer to find their own meaning in the events, making the story personal rather than prescriptive. Some find it deeply pessimistic, a vision of a world without hope where innocence is inevitably destroyed. Others find elements of resistance and defiance in Six and Mono's refusal to give up despite overwhelming odds, seeing their survival even in corrupted forms as a kind of victory. The relationship between Six and Mono has generated particular interest for its complexity and ultimate tragedy. Their partnership represents something rare and precious in the nightmare world. Two individuals working together and caring about each other in an environment where everyone else is either predator or prey. The betrayal at the end hits harder because of the genuine connection that was built before it, making viewers feel the emotional impact of Six's choice. The question of whether Six's betrayal was justified or understandable versus cruel and unforgivable has no clear answer, allowing for continued debate and discussion. Little Nightmares has also contributed to broader conversations about the representation of children in horror media. Six and Mono are not passive victims waiting to be rescued but active agents who fight back against their oppressors, using intelligence and courage to survive. At the same time, the story does not shy away from showing the psychological and moral damage that survival inflicts on them. They are not innocent victims who remain pure despite their suffering, but complex characters who are changed and corrupted by their experiences. This more nuanced approach to child characters in horror has influenced other creators to develop more sophisticated and realistic portrayals. Despite the rich detail and careful construction of the Little Nightmares world, many questions remain unanswered, leaving gaps that viewers continue to speculate about and debate. These mysteries are not flaws in the storytelling but deliberate choices that allow the story to maintain its air of the unknown and unknowable. One of the biggest mysteries is the true nature of the lady and her relationship to Six. Some viewers believe the lady is Six's mother or other relative, pointing to similarities in their appearance and the fact that Six takes on the lady's powers after consuming her. Others think the lady represents what Six will become in the future, making her consumption of the lady a kind of dark inheritance or fulfillment of destiny. The evidence for any specific interpretation is ambiguous, allowing multiple theories to coexist. If the lady is connected to Six by blood or fate, it adds another layer of tragedy to their confrontation, suggesting that Six is either killing family or becoming the very monster she fought to escape. The origin of Six's hunger is never fully explained. Is it something natural to her character, a trait she was born with, or is it caused by the Maw itself, a corruption that spreads to everyone who enters the ship? Does the hunger exist before Six wakes up in the depths, or does it develop over the course of her journey as she is exposed to the Maw's influence? The progressive nature of the hunger, getting stronger and demanding more extreme satisfaction as the story continues, suggests it might be a growing corruption rather than a stable trait. But Six's ability to consume the lady and take her powers might indicate that she had some special quality all along, something that marked her as different from the other children who could not survive. The Thin Man's true identity beyond being Mono from the future raises questions about how he came to serve the tower. Is Mono's transformation into the Thin Man inevitable, something that happens to everyone trapped in the tower's heart for long enough? Or is there something specific about Mono that makes him suitable for this role? Does the Thin Man retain Mono's memories and consciousness, making his actions a deliberate attempt to change the past? Or is he more like a puppet being controlled by the tower with only fragments of Mono's identity remaining? The loop itself raises questions about causality and whether it has always existed or if there was an original timeline that diverged into the loop. If there was a first iteration, what happened differently, and how did the loop form? The nature of the nightmare world and how it came to be this way remains mysterious. Was there a specific catastrophic event that transformed normal reality into this horror? Or did it happen gradually over time? Are there places in the world that have not fallen to corruption? Regions where people still live normal lives? Or has the nightmare spread everywhere? If there are still normal places, why doesn't anyone try to escape the nightmare regions to reach them? The presence of technology like televisions and electric lights suggests this world is relatively modern, but the decay and abandonment suggests significant time has passed since society functioned normally. The other children who appear throughout both stories are all unnamed and their origins are never explained. Where do they come from, and how do they end up in these nightmare locations? Are they being deliberately kidnapped and brought to the Maw and the Pale City, or do they simply appear as part of the nightmare world's nature? The lack of any adults who are not monsters suggests that something happens to people as they age in this world, transforming them into the grotesque creatures we see or causing them to disappear entirely. Do the children who survive long enough eventually transform into monsters themselves? Or is there something unique about Six and Mono that allows them to resist complete transformation even as they are corrupted in other ways? The music box that appears during Mono's final confrontation with the corrupted Six is one of the most symbolically rich objects in the entire story, and its meaning has been debated extensively. This simple toy becomes the focus of the entire sequence, with Six clinging to it desperately while Mono tries to destroy it, understanding somehow that the music box is key to freeing Six from the tower's corruption. The music box plays a haunting melody that seems to soothe Six in her monstrous form, keeping her calm as long as the music continues. When Mono damages the music box, Six becomes frantic and violent, attacking him to prevent further harm to her precious object. The music box represents comfort and safety in a world where both are nearly impossible to find. For Six, the music box might be a connection to childhood innocence or happier times before the nightmare, a fragment of normalcy she can cling to even as everything else has become horrible. The tower has amplified this attachment, using Six's need for comfort against her by making the music box into a prison that keeps her trapped in a childlike state. As long as Six has the music box, she does not have to face the full horror of her situation or make the difficult choices that survival requires. She can retreat into the simple pleasure of the music and ignore everything else. Mono's destruction of the music box is an act of brutal kindness, forcing Six to face reality and let go of the false comfort that is keeping her imprisoned. Each time Mono strikes the music box, Six is freed a little more from the tower's control, but also loses a piece of the comfort that has sustained her. By the time the music box is completely destroyed, Six has returned to her normal form, but she has also been stripped of her defenses and must confront the world without the protection the music box provided. This experience might explain why Six betrays Mono shortly afterward. He has forced her to give up the one source of comfort she had found, has literally smashed her safe haven to pieces, even though it was necessary for her survival. The music box can also be interpreted as representing addiction or unhealthy coping mechanisms. Six has become dependent on the music box to feel safe, and this dependency has been exploited by the tower to trap her. Breaking the addiction is painful and traumatic, but it is necessary if Six is going to be able to function and escape. Mono takes on the role of interventionist, destroying the thing Six is addicted to despite her protests and attacks. But as with many real interventions, the relationship between the person being helped and the person helping them is damaged or destroyed by the process. Six may resent Mono for what he did even though it saved her life. The music box might also represent childhood itself, the state of innocence and simplicity that Six is being forced to leave behind. The tower has trapped Six in an extended childhood, keeping her in a form where she does not have to grow up or face adult responsibilities and horrors. Mono's destruction of the music box forces Six to mature, to leave childhood behind and enter a darker, more complex existence. But this forced maturation is traumatic, a violent theft of innocence rather than a natural progression. Six's betrayal of Mono might be her first act as someone who has been forced to grow up too quickly, choosing survival and self-preservation over loyalty and friendship, making the cold calculations of adulthood rather than the hopeful cooperation of children. The haunting melody itself has been analyzed for its emotional content and structure. The music is simple and repetitive, like a real music box, but with an underlying sadness that suggests loss and melancholy. The melody does not resolve, always leaving a sense of incompleteness, suggesting that the comfort the music box provides is temporary and false, never truly satisfying the need it claims to fill. When the music stops because the box is destroyed, the silence is shocking and uncomfortable, making viewers understand why Six fought so hard to protect this source of sound in the overwhelming quiet of the tower. The Pale City in Mono's story is not just a setting but functions almost as a character itself, a living environment that actively opposes the children trying to navigate its streets. The city was once a thriving place where people lived and worked, raised families and built communities. But the tower's influence has drained the life from everything, leaving behind a corpse of a city where the buildings stand empty and the streets are silent except for the buzz of television static. The architecture of the Pale City reveals its history through environmental storytelling. We see apartment buildings with clothes still hanging in closets and dishes still sitting in sinks, suggesting that the inhabitants left suddenly or simply stopped caring about normal life. We see schools with classrooms full of desks and learning materials that have not been touched in a long time, suggesting that education stopped when the tower's broadcasts became the only information anyone needed. We see hospitals that were once centers of healing but have become places of horror where the medical staff prey on the patients rather than helping them. Each location shows a different aspect of normal society that has been corrupted and twisted into nightmare. The viewers who remain in the Pale City are tragic figures in their own right. They were once normal people with jobs and families and dreams for the future. But exposure to the tower's broadcasts has reduced them to shells, hollow beings who exist only to watch screens. They do not eat or sleep or communicate with each other. They simply sit and stare, sometimes for so long that their bodies begin to waste away. When Mono and Six encounter these viewers, they are seeing what happens to adults in this world, the fate that might await them if they survive to maturity. The viewers are not actively malicious or cruel like the other monsters. They are victims who have lost everything that made them human, reduced to the single function of watching television. But they become dangerous when their viewing is interrupted because the broadcasts are the only thing they have left, the only purpose that remains in their empty lives. The city's decay is physical as well as spiritual. Buildings are falling apart, their walls cracked and their roofs caving in. Streets are cracked and overgrown with dead vegetation. The rain that falls constantly is cold and depressing, adding to the sense that nature itself has given up on this place. The fog that blankets everything makes it impossible to see very far in any direction, creating a sense of isolation and claustrophobia even in the open streets. The Pale City feels like a place that is slowly dying, sliding toward complete collapse, while the tower continues broadcasting to an audience that diminishes every day. The businesses and shops that line the streets show what people once valued before the tower consumed everything. There are toy stores with dolls and action figures still displayed in the windows, suggesting that children once played here. There are clothing stores with mannequins wearing fashions that are now outdated and forgotten. There are restaurants and cafes that once served food to hungry customers but now sit empty with their tables still set. Each of these locations is a ghost of normal life, a reminder that the Pale City was once a real place before the nightmare transformed it. The Hunter's Wilderness at the edge of the city represents the boundary between civilization and the wild, though both have been equally corrupted. The Hunter himself seems to have rejected the city's broadcast-based control in favor of a more primitive horror, choosing to hunt and kill in the old-fashioned way rather than sitting in front of a television. His stuffed trophies suggest he has been killing for a long time, adding children to his collection alongside various animals. The fact that Six is imprisoned in his house when Mono finds her raises questions about how she came to be captured, whether the Hunter found her in the forest or if she was fleeing the city. When he caught her, one of the most striking aspects of Little Nightmares is the almost complete absence of dialogue. Six and Mono never speak, communicating only through gestures and actions. The monsters make sounds but never speak words. There are no cutscenes with exposition or characters explaining the backstory. The entire narrative is told through environmental details, character actions, and visual symbolism. This silent approach to storytelling is challenging but ultimately more effective than traditional narrative methods would have been. The lack of dialogue forces viewers to pay close attention to everything happening on screen, looking for clues and meaning in every detail. It also makes the story more universal because it is not bound to any specific language or culture. The emotions and themes are communicated visually, making them accessible to anyone regardless of what language they speak. The silence itself becomes part of the atmosphere, adding to the sense of isolation and alienation that permeates the nightmare world. Six and Mono's lack of speech emphasizes their vulnerability and powerlessness. Children in the real world use words to ask for help, to call out to adults to make their needs known. But Six and Mono have no adults to call to and no help coming. Their silence is the silence of children who have learned that crying out brings only danger, that making noise attracts predators, that they must suffer quietly if they want to survive. This silent suffering makes them more sympathetic because we cannot hear them complain or beg. We can only watch them endure. The monsters are scarier because they do not speak or explain themselves. The janitor never tells Six why he is hunting children. The chefs never discuss what they are preparing in the kitchen. The lady never explains her purpose or motives. They are unknowable threats, operating according to rules and desires that remain hidden. This unknowability is more frightening than any explanation could be because it leaves everything to the imagination. The monsters become projections of primal fears rather than specific antagonists with understandable goals. The environmental storytelling requires viewers to be active participants in constructing the narrative rather than passive recipients of information. Noticing the cages in the janitor's lair leads to questions about what they are for and where the children come from. Seeing the prepared dishes in the kitchen raises horrible suspicions about what the guests are eating. Finding the remains of other children who failed to escape tells us about the stakes and the cost of failure. Each detail adds another piece to the puzzle, and viewers must assemble these pieces themselves to understand the full picture. The visual symbolism works on multiple levels, communicating literal information while also suggesting deeper thematic meanings. Six Yellow Raincoat is literally a piece of clothing that makes her visible, but it also symbolizes defiance, hope, and the refusal to disappear into darkness. The music box is literally a toy that plays a melody, but it also represents comfort, childhood, addiction, and false security. The tower is literally a structure that broadcasts television signals, but it also represents control, corruption, and the death of free will. These symbols are never explained verbally, allowing them to accumulate meaning through their context and use in the story. The physical actions that Six and Mono perform communicate their characters without need for words. Six, desperate eating when the hunger overtakes her, shows her vulnerability and the darkness growing inside her. Mono's willingness to fight monsters much larger than himself shows his courage and determination. Six, helping Mono climb to high places shows trust and cooperation. Mono saving Six from the tower's corruption shows devotion and sacrifice. And Six letting Mono fall shows betrayal and the limits of trust in a nightmare world. Each action reveals character and advances the narrative without a single word being spoken. The endings of both Six and Mono's stories have generated enormous discussion and emotional response because they refuse to provide traditional resolution or catharsis. Six does not escape the maw and return to a happy normal life. Mono does not rescue Six and defeat the tower to live happily ever after. Instead, both endings are deeply ambiguous and troubling, leaving viewers with more questions than answers and more discomfort than satisfaction. Six's ending sees her escaping the maw physically but carrying the darkness with her. She has consumed the lady and taken her power, becoming something more than human but also something less. The guests part before her in fear as she walks through the dining hall toward the exit, showing that she has become something powerful enough to intimidate even the monsters. But this power comes with corruption. Six has learned to feed on others, has discovered that consuming souls satisfies her hunger in ways that normal food cannot. When she leaves the maw in her small boat, rowing away into the fog, she is free but also alone, changed by her experiences into someone who can never return to innocence even if she finds safety. The ambiguity of what happens to Six after she escapes allows viewers to imagine different futures. Perhaps she finds other survivors and uses her powers to protect them, becoming a dark hero who fights monsters with their own methods. Perhaps she becomes a monster herself, hunting and feeding on others to satisfy her endless hunger. Perhaps she eventually finds a way to purge the darkness from herself and reclaim some measure of humanity. Or perhaps she simply continues drifting through the nightmare world, surviving from day to day without purpose or hope. The story does not tell us, leaving Six's ultimate fate open to interpretation. Mono's ending is even more tragic because it involves betrayal and the revelation of the time loop. The moment when Six lets go of Mono's hand is shocking and heartbreaking, all the more so because it seems to come from nowhere. Six and Mono have built trust and partnership throughout their journey. Six has helped Mono multiple times, and Mono has literally traveled into the tower's heart to save her from corruption. And then, at the moment when one simple action would complete their escape, Six chooses to let Mono fall. The screen goes dark as Mono plunges into the depths, and we think perhaps this is death, a sad but final ending. But then we see Mono sitting in the small room at the tower's heart, and we understand that something worse than death awaits him. Mono is trapped, imprisoned in this tiny space with no escape and no companionship except the television that shows him distorted visions of the world outside. Time passes and fast-forward as Mono sits in the chair, his body growing taller, his clothes changing, until finally we see the thin man emerge from the room, and we understand the horrible truth. Mono has become the very monster that hunted him and Six throughout their journey. The hero has become the villain. The child trying to escape has become the jailer. The cycle is complete and will begin again, with the thin man hunting the next iteration of Six and Mono, trying and failing to prevent the betrayal that created him. This revelation recontextualizes everything we have seen. The thin man was not hunting Six out of malice but out of desperate need to change the past. His capture and transformation of Six was an attempt to prevent her from betraying Mono. His appearance at various points throughout the journey was not random but precisely targeted to stop events from unfolding as they had before. But all his efforts fail because they are part of the loop, because his interference is what drives Six to let go, because he cannot change what has already happened from his perspective even though it has not happened yet from Mono's. The tragedy is compounded by the fact that Mono's suffering is endless, trapped in a loop that will repeat forever with no hope of escape or change. Throughout the Little Nightmares story, hope and despair battle for dominance, with despair ultimately winning but hope never completely extinguished. This balance is crucial to the story's emotional impact because total hopelessness would be numbing while false hope would be dishonest. The story acknowledges that hope exists even in the darkest circumstances, while also showing that hope alone is not enough to overcome overwhelming evil. Six and Mono both demonstrate hope through their actions. They keep trying to escape even when escape seems impossible. They help each other even though trusting others is dangerous. They face monsters much larger and more powerful than themselves rather than simply giving up and accepting death. This persistence in the face of hopeless odds is a form of hope itself, the belief that survival is possible if they just keep moving forward. Their hope is not naive or blind, but is instead a practical determination to survive. To see tomorrow even if tomorrow brings only more nightmare. But the story also shows the limits of hope and the ways that hope can be crushed or corrupted. The other children who appear briefly in both stories all presumably had hope that they could escape, but they all failed and died. Their deaths remind us that hope alone does not guarantee survival, that sometimes circumstances are too dire and enemies too powerful for hope to overcome. 6. Transformation from victim to predator shows how hope can be corrupted into something darker, how the desire to survive can lead someone to become the very thing they feared. By the end of her journey, 6's hope for escape has been fulfilled, but the cost has been her humanity. Mono's fate represents the ultimate destruction of hope. He had hoped that he and 6 could escape together, hope that his efforts to save her would mean something, hope that trust and partnership could overcome the nightmare world. All of these hopes are destroyed in a single moment when 6 lets him fall. Mono's imprisonment in the tower and transformation into the Thin Man represents eternal despair, trapped in a cycle where even his suffering serves the system he tried to defeat. The time loop ensures that Mono can never have hope again because he knows exactly how events will unfold, knows that every attempt to change things will fail, knows that he is doomed to create his own doom forever. The nightmare world itself seems designed to crush hope. The Maw operates with mechanical efficiency, processing children regardless of their struggles. The tower broadcasts constantly, draining humanity from everyone who watches. The monsters hunt without mercy or hesitation. There are no safe places to rest, no adults who will help, no authorities to appeal to for justice or protection. The world is hostile to life itself, especially young life, and survival requires becoming hard and cold and willing to do terrible things. Yet despite all this, the fact that 6 and Mono keep fighting matters. Their resistance may ultimately fail or be corrupted, but the act of resistance itself is meaningful. They refuse to die quietly, refuse to make it easy for the monsters, refuse to become passive victims. 6 walk through the dining hall at the end, with the guests parting before her, is a moment of triumph even though she has been corrupted. She has beaten the Maw at its own game, has taken power from the lady, has made the monsters fear her. This is a dark victory, but a victory nonetheless. Mono's determination to save 6, even knowing it will likely lead to his doom, is heroic even though it is tragic. He chooses to help someone he cares about rather than abandoning her to save himself. And this choice matters even though it ultimately results in betrayal and suffering. When we step back and look at the complete story of Little Nightmares, encompassing both the Maw and the Signal Tower, we see a comprehensive portrait of a world where childhood innocence is systematically destroyed and where survival requires becoming monstrous. 6 and Mono's parallel journeys show different aspects of this destruction, different paths through the nightmare that lead to similar endpoints of corruption and loss. 6's journey is about internal corruption, the darkness that grows within her throughout her time on the Maw. She starts as a victim, helpless and hunted, but gradually becomes a survivor and finally a predator. Her hunger is both literal and metaphorical, representing physical need and spiritual emptiness. By consuming the lady, 6 completes her transformation from prey to apex predator, gaining power but losing her soul. Her betrayal of Mono later is consistent with this transformation because she has already learned that survival means choosing yourself over others, that caring about other people is a weakness that will get you killed. 6's character arc is a tragedy of corruption, showing how trauma and terrible circumstances can twist even a child into something dark. Mono's journey is about external entrapment, being caught in systems and cycles beyond his control. He is more actively heroic than 6, fighting monsters and trying to save others rather than just escaping himself. But his heroism leads to his downfall because the nightmare world punishes goodness and rewards selfishness. Mono becomes trapped in the tower not because he was weak or cowardly but because he was strong and brave and caring. His transformation into the Thin Man represents the ultimate victory of the system over the individual, taking someone who fought against corruption and making him into an agent of that corruption. Mono's character arc is a tragedy of betrayal and fate, showing how even the best intentions can lead to the worst outcomes. Together, their stories create a complete picture of how the nightmare world operates and what it does to those who inhabit it. The mole represents institutional evil, a system designed to process and consume the vulnerable for the benefit of the powerful. The tower represents technological evil, using media and broadcasts to control minds and drain humanity. Both represent different aspects of how societies can become corrupt, how systems can be built that perpetuate suffering and destroy innocence. Six and Mono are just two children among presumably many who have tried and failed to escape these systems, and their fates show how difficult or impossible true escape really is. The connection between their stories through Six's presence in both creates a unified narrative about the cost of survival. If we accept that Six helps Mono after escaping the maw, then her betrayal of him shows that her corruption is complete, that the girl who might once have sacrificed to save a friend is gone, replaced by someone who calculates that Mono might be dangerous or simply that saving him is not worth the risk. If we accept that Six helps Mono before the maw, then her time with him is the last moment of her innocence, the final partnership before she descends completely into darkness. Either interpretation paints a picture of inevitable corruption, of innocence that cannot survive in the nightmare world. The visual storytelling, atmospheric horror, and symbolic depth of Little Nightmares combine to create an experience that lingers long after the story ends. The images of Six in her yellow raincoat fleeing from grotesque monsters, of Mono fighting desperately to save someone who will betray him, of the endless cycle that traps them both in different ways. These images stay with viewers and prompt ongoing reflection and interpretation. As we reach the end of this documentary exploration of Little Nightmares, we must confront the fundamental truth at the heart of both the maw and the signal tower. This is a story about what happens to innocence when it encounters pure evil, about how children who should be protected are instead hunted and consumed, about how survival in hell requires becoming a demon yourself. Six and Mono's journeys are not uplifting tales of heroism triumphing over adversity. They are tragedies of corruption and loss, showing us characters who start as sympathetic victims and end as something far more complicated and disturbing. Six escapes the maw but carries its darkness with her forever, having learned to consume others to fill the void inside herself. Mono tries to be a hero and ends up trapped in an eternal prison, transformed into the very monster he fought against, doomed to repeat his own tragedy forever in an unbreakable loop. The nightmare world they inhabit is a distorted reflection of our own, taking the problems of our society like overconsumption, media addiction, institutional cruelty, and class exploitation, and amplifying them until they become monstrous. The guests on the maw are us taken to our worst extreme, consuming without thought or limit. The viewers in the Pale City are us at our most passive, staring at screens while life passes us by. The monsters who hunt children are the corrupt authorities and systems that fail to protect the vulnerable. And Six and Mono are the children who suffer the consequences of adult failures, forced to navigate a world they never made and cannot fix. What makes Little Nightmares particularly powerful is its refusal to provide easy answers or comfortable resolutions. The story does not end with evil defeated and good triumphant. It ends with Six walking alone into the fog, carrying corruption within her, and with Mono trapped forever in the tower's heart, his future becoming his past in endless repetition. These endings are unsatisfying in the traditional narrative sense, but they are honest in ways that happy endings would not be. They acknowledge that some damage cannot be undone, that some wounds never fully heal, that surviving trauma does not mean escaping it unscathed. The silence that pervades both stories speaks volumes about isolation and the inability to communicate suffering. Six and Mono never speak because they have no words for what they are experiencing, because the nightmare they inhabit is beyond language. Their silence is the silence of all traumatized children who cannot articulate what has happened to them, who must carry their pain internally because no one is listening. The few sounds we hear, the creaking of the maw's metal hull, the static from the tower's broadcasts, the heavy footsteps of approaching monsters, these sounds create a soundscape of fear where danger is always present and safety never guaranteed. The legacy of Little Nightmares extends beyond its immediate story to influence how we think about horror, childhood, and the ways that innocence is lost. It reminds us that children are not immune to the darkness of the world, that they often bear the greatest burden of adult failures, that their suffering is real and profound even when adults fail to notice or care. The story asks us to see the world from a child's perspective, where adults are powerful and incomprehensible, where the systems and institutions that govern society seem designed to hurt rather than help, where trust is dangerous and friendship can lead to betrayal. In the end, Little Nightmares is a warning and a lament. It warns us about the consequences of unchecked consumption, uncontrolled media, institutional cruelty, and the exploitation of the vulnerable. It laments the loss of innocence that occurs when children are forced to become survivors in a hostile world, when they must choose between dying pure or living corrupted. Six and Mono's stories are tragedies, but they are tragedies that matter, that make us think and feel, that stay with us long after the details fade. They remind us that some battles cannot be won, that some evils cannot be defeated, but that the struggle to survive and resist and maintain some shred of humanity is worth the cost even when the outcome is dark. The girl in the yellow raincoat and the boy in the paper bag walk through nightmares that will never fully end, carrying with them the hope that somewhere beyond the fog and static and darkness, there might be something better waiting. That hope is fragile and perhaps illusory, but it persists because it must, because without hope there is only despair, and despair is the final victory of the nightmare world. And so their stories continue, six walking forward into whatever comes next, Mono trapped but never quite broken, both of them testaments to the resilience of the human spirit even when that spirit has been twisted almost beyond recognition. This is the entire story of Little Nightmares, of the Maw and the Signal Tower, of hunger and control, of betrayal and cycles that never end. It is a story that disturbs and challenges, that refuses comfort but offers something perhaps more valuable. Truth about the darkness that exists in the world and in ourselves, and about the terrible price we pay when innocence encounters that darkness and must either surrender or become dark itself.